Greetings. Welcome to the Dakota County Attorney Candidate Forum. My name is Tina Surstad. I'm a proud member of the League of Women Voters Dakota County, and as always at our events, we want to remind you that the League of Women Voters Dakota County is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences policy through education and advocacy. We never endorse parties or candidates. And now, let me introduce our moderator tonight, Lynn Lewis. Lynn is a trained moderator, an active member of the League, and a co-chair of the Voter Service Committee. We are privileged to have Lynn moderating our forum tonight.
Good evening, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters, Dakota County, I'd like to welcome you to the Dakota County Attorney Candidate Forum. Thank you to the candidates for attending tonight. We would also like to thank Eagan Community TV for their willingness to record and broadcast this event. Because this is a county-wide election, we're also appreciative of other community TV stations who will be broadcasting this forum in their service areas. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose a political party or candidate for office. LWV Dakota County provides unbiased candidate and issue information that's used by Minnesota voters regardless of their political beliefs. Sponsorship of this forum is a public service, providing you with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss important issues face to face. The views expressed here are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. Sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the League of any particular candidate. As a reminder, this forum is for the general election for Dakota County Attorney. The candidates we have here tonight received the most votes in the primary elections held in August. We will start the candidate forum with opening statements. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes for their opening statement and 3 minutes for their closing statement. Opening statements will be in alphabetical order, beginning with Kathy Keena and then proceeding to Matt Little. Closing statements will be in reverse alphabetical order. The order of answering questions will be alternated. Candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to the questions. We ask the candidates to respect these time limits. Please note our timekeeper, who has a yellow 15-second sign. There is also a stop sign that indicates you should conclude your sentence so we can move on to the next candidate. Many of the questions for this evening were submitted to the League by email. They were reviewed by a committee of League members and edited for clarity. In addition, this committee developed some questions based on topics of interest they identified in the community. Because of time constraints, we're not able to ask all the questions submitted. The forum will conclude in an hour. Let's begin with opening statements. The order for opening statements will be Kathy Keena, followed by Matt Little. Kathy?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kathy Keena, and I currently serve as the Dakota County Attorney. I started with the Dakota County Attorney's Office in 2000, initially working as a prosecutor in the criminal division, where I was assigned to prosecute felony-level offenses committed by adults. After 5 years, I transferred to the civil division, where I represented the county in civil litigation and provided legal services to the county board and numerous county departments. In 2013, I was promoted to the position of criminal division head. In 2019, I was promoted to the position of chief deputy county attorney. And in 2021, I was unanimously appointed by the Dakota County Board of Commissioners as the county attorney to fill out the term of Jim Backstrom, who retired. My public service career also includes working as a public defender in Alexandria, Minnesota, followed by my service in the Lyon County Attorney's Office for 7 years, 5 of those as the Lyon County Attorney. As the county attorney, I'm responsible for carrying out several statutory duties, some of which include prosecuting all felony-level offenses committed by adults, providing legal services to the county board and county departments on a wide array of topics, and representing the county in civil litigation, prosecuting all level of offenses committed by juveniles in Dakota County, ensuring the rights of crime victims are safeguarded, handling appeals in both state and federal appellate courts, developing and administering several adult and juvenile diversion programs, representing the county in child protection and adult protection matters, including civil commitments, providing child support enforcement services, and establishing paternity in public assistance cases, and handling election complaints. My key priority, in partnership with the Dakota County law enforcement agencies, is to continue protecting public safety by prosecuting crime in a fair and just manner, to hold people accountable for the crimes they commit, and to ensure the rights of crime victims are vindicated. In protecting public safety, I will continue to collaborate with stakeholders to reduce criminal justice involvement with those living with a mental illness and/or a substance use disorder. I'm running for this position because I've devoted 22 years of my life serving the residents of this county, performing the duties of the county attorney. I have the depth and breadth of experience to lead a staff of nearly 100 employees, to effectively carry out those duties, and to do so with good judgment, common sense, and integrity. Thank you.
Matt?
Before I begin, I want to start with some thank yous. First, I just want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum. It will be one of the few debates that's put on here in Dakota County, so I'm very grateful for this opportunity. The second is I want to thank Kathy Keena for stepping up to run. Democracy does not work without options. And then finally, I want to thank the viewers for tuning in and sticking through a whole debate. My name is Matt Little. I'm running to provide safety and justice for all. I was born and raised in Lakeville, where I was fortunate enough to serve as 2 terms as its mayor. I went on to also serve as the state senator for Southern Dakota County. I'm married to my wife, Coco, who we met in law school. Most importantly, I am Poppy's dad. That's our 3-year-old daughter. If you asked her, she'd say her favorite hobbies are probably coloring and playing outside, but I'm convinced her favorite hobby is telling me what to do. I'm running because I think the next generation deserves better than what they're getting. Things are not working. As county attorney, we can reduce the gun violence that's tearing through our schools and country by prosecuting straw person purchasers, keeping guns out of the hands of domestic abusers and felons, and we need to take every threat that comes through seriously. I'll advocate for background checks, red flag laws, and a ban on assault rifles. We should also protect a woman's right to choose. I will keep the structure of Roe versus Wade intact here in Dakota County, no matter what the legislature does. I'll turn back dangerous trends in violent crime and go after dealers of hard drugs who are killing our friends, families, and neighbors. I'll make sure every child feels safe in their own home. I'll protect seniors from fraud and abuse. I'll end cycles of violence and ensure that every sexual assault allegation is heard, investigated, and prosecuted accordingly. We can reduce juvenile crime and get kids on a better path. We can establish a veterans court that's right here in Dakota County and stop just sending our veterans to Carver County. We should shift our focus away from prosecuting marijuana. We need to end the criminalization of poverty, prosecute wage theft, and protect the environment. We can do all that and more. The county attorney's office has the power and capacity and resources to do all that. But this race and today's forum will be about transparency. One candidate in this general election race is willing to answer questions, and another is not. When the Star Tribune asked Kathy Keena what we should do about gun violence, she said, "I do not comment on local or national issues." When the West St. Paul Reader asked whether she thought the 2020 election was legitimate or whether she supported a woman's right to choose, she refused to answer. I hope today the voters get those answers. My name is Matt Little, and I'm running to be your next Dakota County Attorney.
Thank you, candidates. Now let's proceed to questions. The response order for the first question is Matt Little, followed by Kathy Keena. And the first question is, what are the 3 most pressing issues you will tackle as Dakota County Attorney? Matt?
Yeah, thank you. I think the number one pressing issue is we need leadership in the county attorney's office. I think some people would be surprised to know that the county attorney's office actually has one fewer employee than it did in 2018. And we are one of, if not the fastest growing county in the state of Minnesota. And you don't have to drive around very far to see how many people are moving here. So the county attorney's office does not have the resources it needs because it hasn't successfully passed an increase in their budget. In fact, in 2020 and 2021, an increase in the budget wasn't even requested by the county attorney's office. And so the attorneys are overwhelmed. There continues to be a backlog, which causes problems with retention and handling the caseload. The two other issues I would highlight are violent crime and gun violence. You know, there was a story that came out today that said gun violence is at a 20-year high. So we need a comprehensive plan to go after gun violence and prevent gun violence. And I'll continue to advocate for the things I've been advocating my whole career: background checks and red flag laws, ban on assault rifles. Finally, we need to go after people who are dealing hard drugs like methamphetamine and fentanyl that are killing people. And that's why I would shift our focus away from prosecution of marijuana and focus on those drugs that are killing people and making our communities less safe.
Kathy?
Thank you. And just a point of clarification, the reason why we have one fewer employee since 2018 is because I took a leave of absence from my position as chief deputy. I'd also like to respond to not adding any employees to our office. We in fact did add 2 attorneys this year through the use of ARPA funding that the county board provided to my office to hire 2 temporary attorneys for a period of 2 years to help us deal with the criminal case backlog. The issues that, in looking at public safety in general, and I don't disagree with Mr. Little on much of what he says on what the issues that are facing citizens of this country. But when you look specifically at Dakota County, one of the things that is really keeping me awake at night is fentanyl poisoning. So when we talk about pursuing drugs that are really killing people, it's actually fentanyl poisoning. It's become a national public health crisis. Illicit fentanyl is now the #1 cause of death among Americans ages 18 to 45. The number of deaths exceeds the combined deaths by suicide, COVID, car crashes, and gun violence for that age group. And we're not immune to that in Dakota County. Last year we had 56 overdose deaths. Of those, 42 were attributable to illicit fentanyl. We're being flooded by this drug. As of about 3 weeks ago, our Dakota County Drug Task Force had confiscated approximately 100,000 pills believed to contain illicit fentanyl.
Thank you, Kathy. The second question, the response order will be Kathy Keena, followed by Matt Little. And the next question is, you identified 3 issues facing Dakota County. What specifically would you do to address these issues?
So with the fentanyl issue that I identified in the time that I had, we're taking a multi-pronged approach. I think most importantly, equally important is doing prevention and education. Our office has been participating in public awareness forums, and along with that is enforcement. We are prosecuting fentanyl cases aggressively, and we recently co-sponsored a training with the Dakota County Drug Task Force to train law enforcement officers on the investigation of those overdose deaths. We trained 95 officers. In addressing crime in general, one of my biggest priorities is trying to work on solutions to prevent people with mental illness and or substance use disorders from entering the criminal justice system in the first place. And Dakota County has really been a leader in that. Within the last 2 years, Dakota County has implemented a pilot project that now has been implemented fully, of having crisis calls that go into 911 actually get diverted to crisis social workers. We've also established co-response teams. We are working on embedding social workers in every police department to help those and follow up with those that made the crisis call.
Matt?
Thank you for this question and the extended content and substance on what we're actually going to do. I'll first start off with the reason they're down a full-time employee is not because of the leave of absence. That job is actually still in the budget. The full-time employee was reduced in 2019 prior to Kathy Keena's appointment, so that's just not true. We need leadership on the budget. We need someone that knows how to work with the board to get an adequate budget. If we are going to keep people safe and we are going to heal people and take care of this county, we need the resources to do it. We're the third largest county in Minnesota, and we haven't had a budget increase for 4 years. And you just heard the admission there that we have 2 temporary attorneys. That's not good enough. We need a long-term plan with an established budget that serves the citizens of this county. On fentanyl, you heard it here first. What we're doing right now is not working. It's at an all-time high. Deaths with fentanyl are at an all-time high. So what we're doing in the status quo is not working. It has to change. And that's because we cannot solve everything in the courtroom. We have to look beyond that, a comprehensive approach to the individual. We need to make sure that we can get people the treatment they need to reduce the amount of people that are addicted to this drug. And we can't do that just by tunnel vision and prosecuting everybody that is addicted. It just doesn't work that way. On gun violence, I think I've spoken quite a bit about what I would do to prevent that. So thank you.
The response order for the third question will be Matt Little, followed by Kathy Keena. And the third question is, many are concerned with increased gun violence in our communities. What would you do to help reverse this trend? Matt?
I think the day one stuff is we can enforce conditions of release. When someone is arrested for a violent crime or they have a proclivity towards violence, you can get in the conditions there that they are not allowed to possess or purchase a firearm, and we need to actually enforce those. Very rarely is that enforced. We can also go after the laws that are on the books in terms of straw person purchasers, making sure that people that are buying guns for people that are ineligible are being prosecuted. But again, we have to take a comprehensive approach. Can't solve it all in the courtroom. I'll be a strong advocate for background checks. That's something that Jim Backstrom was up at the Capitol advocating for throughout his career. And I'll do the same on red flag laws and a ban on assault weapons. Until we have a comprehensive approach, we won't be able to solve gun violence in a meaningful way. And that's why you're seeing this continued increases in gun violence. And it's got to stop. I'm heartbroken. You know, when I was in high school, we had to do drills for tornadoes, and now the drills that kids are having to do in their schools are just absolutely horrid. That they have to learn how to lock their doors and defend themselves and bandage a wound. That's not something our kids should have to learn. So we need to create a society where that's not a reality.
Kathy?
Thank you. You know, prosecuting gun control or gun crimes is not the solution. It's not the entire solution. Definitely not a long-term solution. To reduce gun violence and crime in general, we as a society need to work on the root causes of violence, such as systemic racism, poverty, housing instability, and providing adequate services for mental health and substance use disorders. You know, when you look at gun violence, you know, obviously the mass shootings that have been happening all over are the ones that garner the most attention, and they scare us. And that's why kids unfortunately have to do drills in school. It's why we have to do it at work in the county. But however, in considering gun control, we also need to be cognizant of the daily community gun violence that occurs. In 2020, firearms were the means used in 63% of the homicides that occurred in Minnesota. And when you look at where are those guns coming from, where are people getting access to the guns? Studies show that gun sales are being conducted by a limited number of unsavory gun dealers, straw purchasers, as Mr. Little mentioned, and most commonly they're being stolen from legal gun owners who aren't safely securing their guns in their homes, and they get stolen and they end up out in the street. So lock up your guns safely. You'll protect your kids as well.
Thank you, Kathy. The response order for the fourth question will be Kathy Keena, followed by Matt Little. And our next question is, besides gun violence, what are other public safety concerns in Dakota County, and how should the county attorney's office address them? Kathy?
Thank you. Well, the primary one that we're really having an issue with is the fentanyl poisoning, and I've already addressed that. And the other public safety issue that we are seeing is a rise in aggravated assaults, which again, you know, those are varied. It can be domestic assaults, it can be strangers who don't know each other. And again, a lot of those, what we're seeing with so many of our cases are people that are not addressing mental health issues and substance use issues. And that's why I think that is just so important for us as a society, not just the county attorney's office. I'm going to do everything I can to help, but it takes all of us to come up with solutions for that. The other issue that I would consider and bring to your attention, and where we're losing more lives than from violent crime, is traffic crashes. In 2021, there were 497 people who lost their lives in crashes on Minnesota roads. That's the highest death toll in Minnesota since 2007. Of those, 162 were speed related. So slow down, don't drive distracted, don't drink and drive, and wear your seatbelt.
Matt?
Thank you. I don't think lock up your guns is a good enough strategy. People want to know whether, as one of two top law enforcement executives in the county, whether we support background checks, red flag laws, and a ban on assault weapons. And I do hope Kathy Keena will take some of her time tonight to answer that question, which has been asked time and again. I think the other things that people are worried about are crimes related to cars, carjackings, car thefts, catalytic converter thefts. That's at the top of people's minds and is happening around the metro area. So we need to make sure we're dedicating resources and coordinating with law enforcement to have timely information, and we're holding people accountable. A lot of these crimes are happening from a few individuals that are committing multiple crimes in different cities. So we need to make sure we have timely action to arrest those individuals and hold them accountable so they're not back out committing these crimes over and over again. I think another one that's been prevalent for so long that hasn't been mentioned is fraud, scams of our parents and grandparents. Those are difficult. Electronic crimes are incredibly difficult to prosecute, but I think the county attorney's office could do more in terms of education in our community to prevent those crimes.
Thank you. The response order for the fifth question will be Matt Little, followed by Kathy Keena. And our fifth question is, what do you see as the role of the Dakota County Attorney in monitoring police misconduct and shaping police reform? And what is your experience in supporting and/or challenging law enforcement? Matt?
Yeah, thank you. I was elected to the Lakeville City Council way back in 2010, and then I became mayor after that. And for 6 years, I made it a point to get our officers the resources they needed to be effective in our community, right? And that meant new equipment, new technology, support staff. We even had an electronic crimes lab in Lakeville on its own that was recently, in the last few years, folded into the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Lab. But I made sure to support our officers and so that they were not overworked, stressed, and overwhelmed. What's happening now in many cities. But in the Senate after George Floyd was murdered, I was a supporter of legislation that passed that banned chokeholds, banned warrior training, and also made sure there was a duty for officers to report when another officer was doing something wrong. I guess I wouldn't call it challenging law enforcement necessarily, but increasing the standards of our public safety personnel. And so I've done both of those things and will continue to take that balanced approach towards law enforcement.
Kathy?
Thank you. You know, I've had 22 years to establish outstanding relationship with all of our law enforcement agencies in Dakota County. And I got to say that there is not a group of law enforcement officers out there who work as hard at doing the right thing as police officers. And when, you know, I'm very supportive of police officers, but that doesn't necessarily mean I side with them on every case, because I have the obligation to uphold the constitutionality or Constitution of both the federal and the state. And that means that if they messed up and they did an illegal search, we're going to have a discussion about that, and I'm not going to be able to charge the case. And we engage in those conversations every time we review one of their cases, and if we turn it down, we tell them why and explain why so that it doesn't happen again. And like Mr. Little mentioned, you know, following the murder of George Floyd, there was some great legislation that was enacted. And that also included, in addition to what Mr. Little mentioned, there were substantial changes made to regulating the authorized use of deadly force by police officers, and I think that was a good change. And, you know, I would just keep in mind, sorry, my time is up. Thank you.
The response order for the sixth question will be Kathy Keena, followed by Matt Little. And this question is, what policies should Dakota County Attorney's Office put in place to ensure fair, unbiased, and consistent use of prosecutorial authority to eliminate racial disparities in the criminal justice system? Kathy?
Thank you. You know, by statute, every county attorney in the state of Minnesota is required to have charging and disposition guidelines. And in those guidelines, we set out the parameters of what our expectations are for our prosecutors. And included in those guidelines are what is appropriate to base your charging decision on and what's not appropriate to base your charging decision on. And one of those, obviously, is race. You cannot base your decision on race, whether you decide to charge it or whether you decide not to charge it. And we're constantly evaluating those. We're constantly evaluating not only in the adult side, but on the juvenile side. Are we seeing disparities on cases that are being referred to our office? For example, we had that happen in the juvenile arena with disorderly conduct cases that were coming out of our schools. And as a result of that, we brought that to the school's attention, and we also adopted a new disorderly conduct diversion program to try to deal with that, because the kids were misbehaving and were acting disorderly, so there had to be some kind of consequence, but at least with that, it wasn't a permanent mark on their record, and they weren't adjudicated delinquent.
Matt?
Thank you. I think that's a highly pertinent question for our fast-growing county. I think it starts with staffing. I think staff should reflect the communities they represent and they oversee. So I would be recruiting and hiring diverse staff to reflect the communities we live in. The second thing I do is change the way we're prosecuting our drug crimes. And I've mentioned it before, but we need to shift our focus away from marijuana. The Dakota County Attorney's Office has had a long history of prosecuting a high level of marijuana cases. I think now in 2022, when so many states have it legalized, it is awful that someone here that has a certain amount of marijuana is considered a felon, but when you go to Colorado, they're considered a small business owner that pays taxes. That inequity is awful, and we're destroying lives with our marijuana laws. Those need to change. I also think we need to go back and undo some of the harm that's been caused here through the use of expungements. People that have low-level drug crimes, let's expunge their records so they can get their lives back, so they can get a job again and be back in the workforce. I also think we need to modify some of the crimes of poverty, like tab fees and broken windshields, and similar traffic fines that get people caught up in ticket cycles.
The response order for the next question will be Matt Little, followed by Kathy Keena. And this question is, what will you do to reduce the number of juveniles, particularly youth of color, brought into the criminal justice system?
Thank you. I know I've been fairly critical of the county attorney's office for the first half of this debate, but this is one of the areas I think that Dakota County does quite well. There are a number of programs for a number of low-level crimes I think are appropriate, that are making sure that juveniles are staying out of the criminal justice system and have the opportunity not to add to their record and to get their life back on track. So I do give kudos to the office for that. There's a couple things that I would look at. The first is, it's not very apparent on the website or in the materials I can find whether the programs are working. In theory, the programs all look good, but it's not clear whether they have the results on the back end. The second thing is I would probably look at what's called a peer court and determine whether that is a good idea for the issues of privacy and bullying. It's a program where a juvenile can agree that other high schoolers kind of hold court and determine their punishment. And I do have some concerns with that, but want to do some further research before I say whether that's an appropriate program in our county or not.
Kathy?
So when you're talking about juvenile justice, the first thing that we need to remember is that juveniles are treated differently because of their age. Research has shown that an adolescent's brain is not developed fully until their early 20s. And it's our policy in our office to take that into consideration when making plea offers or recommending dispositions to the court. In considering case dispositions, our number one goal or number one consideration is rehabilitation of young people by affording them culturally appropriate opportunities for treatment or other support services or alternatives to incarceration. In addition, it's generally our practice for first-time felony offenders to offer them what are called stays of adjudication. So these would be juveniles who don't qualify for one of our pretrial diversion programs like Mr. Little mentioned. But we'll give them a stay of adjudication, which means if they complete their conditions of probation, that they do not end up with a juvenile adjudication and they don't have a juvenile record. As Mr. Little mentioned, we do have 6 different diversion programs that have been successful in keeping juveniles out of the system. We had 291 cases last year that were referred to pretrial diversion that we were able to keep out of the juvenile justice system.
Thank you. The order for the next question will be Kathy Keena, followed by Matt Little. And the 8th question will be, what policies will you put in place to ensure fair, unbiased, and consistent use of criteria that must be met before asking the court to certify a juvenile as an adult? Kathy?
So what happens with certifications in Minnesota, there are what are called presumptive certification cases. And those cases are 16 or 17-year-old juveniles who are charged with a crime that would call for a commitment to the Commissioner of Corrections under the sentencing guidelines if they were an adult. So when we pursue those, that doesn't mean that the juvenile is going to be presumptively certified, and it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to agree that that juvenile be certified. So what happens if we are going to pursue certification? There are different studies that are done. One is completed by a psychologist, and another one is completed by our Community Corrections Department, who actually has a team that reviews the case, and they actually meet as a group and talk about whether certification is appropriate and whether it should be recommended. Once those studies are completed, our office looks at it and determines whether this juvenile should be, or whether we should pursue it. And typically what we're looking at is the age of the child and the seriousness of the offense and what their criminal history is like. And it's very infrequent that we do that. We have to keep in mind that if they're not certified, then they're handled as an extended juvenile jurisdiction case, which means we can keep them on probation until they're age 21. So there's potentially a short period of time that you would be dealing with somebody who, is 18 or 19 and could only keep them on probation for 2 years.
Matt?
Thank you. I think the question is fair and unbiased criteria in terms of when you would attempt to certify a juvenile as an adult. And I think that has to revolve around certain crimes. When a juvenile commits a crime with a gun or a violent crime, those are situations where you need to look at certifying them as an adult. Or repeat offenses, violent offenses certainly would meet that criteria. Kathy Keena is correct in terms of the 16 and 17-year-olds, having a presumption that they could be certified as an adult on certain violent crimes, and that's by state statute. But otherwise, I think it is important to recognize that each person is an individual, and as much as we try and to make neat boxes, like we do in sentencing guidelines, et cetera, in a criminal justice system, each person is an individual dealing with unique circumstances. So to set absolutely rigid criteria, I think, is an impossibility, especially when dealing with juveniles.
Thank you. For our next question, the response order will be Matt Little, followed by Kathy Keena. And our next question is, as Dakota County Attorney, would you propose adopting policies that consider the immigration consequences of criminal convictions of non-citizens? Matt?
Emphatically, yes. I would consider those consequences in prosecution. There are a number of low-level crimes that could constitute moral turpitude in the eyes of the federal government that would deport a person and take them away from their family. And there are a number of low-level crimes that don't justify that. So absolutely, that is something I would add into the criteria that prosecutors could take into account.
Kathy?
Thank you. That is something that we take into account, and I look at one of the changes that I made to our adult diversion program after I became the county attorney was to we didn't offer our diversion program to someone who wasn't in the country legally, and I didn't think that was right. We don't ask those questions. I don't know. I don't want to know. And in conjunction with that, if somebody is here on legal status but faces deportation because of the nature of the offense that they're being prosecuted for, I also put into place with our diversion program that people wouldn't have to get on the record and admit what they did, because what can happen in that regard is even though they haven't been found guilty or that they're pleading guilty, just the fact that they're making admissions on the record can cause them to be deported. So we changed that practice as well. And you know, if we have somebody who's charged with a low-level felony, it's definitely something that it's a severe collateral consequence, and in certain cases, it's just not fair to send somebody out of the country because of committing, for example, a low-level felony theft.
The response order for our next question will be Kathy, followed by Matt. And our next question is, how will you ensure transparency in the Dakota County Attorney's Office? Kathy?
You know, that's something that we're working on right now. We have a case management system that is kind of difficult to pull out the necessary data that I would like to put, for example, on our website, especially race data. And so we're working on that now, so that's one of the things that we're looking at, trying to be more transparent. On other issues, for example, with police officer involved shootings, which I review in our office. We used to do those using a grand jury, but now, because we want to be transparent about the evidence and what actions were taken, we now don't use a grand jury, because everything that's done in a grand jury is kept secret, and people can't find out what happened in the grand jury. So I actually now, in making a decision, if I do decline charging, I draft a very thorough memo on for the basis for my decision. You know, and as far as being transparent about the decisions we make, you know, we put out reports every year. We have, you know, records of the cases that we're turning down and why, and you're welcome to look at them.
Matt?
Thank you. Transparency starts on the campaign. How you campaign is likely how you're going to govern. And so when the voters are asking questions of us, and if you refuse to answer, it doesn't build a whole lot of trust and confidence that if you're elected, you're going to be transparent. And so I think this is a great question to stop and reiterate that people want to know if abortion is made illegal in Minnesota with no exceptions, is Kathy Keena going to prosecute that? People also want to know if you support background checks, red flag laws, or a ban on assault weapons. Voter fraud goes through the county attorney's office. People want to know whether you think the 2020 election results were legitimate. These are questions people are asking. These are questions that the West St. Paul Reader asked of us that I answered in the affirmative on all three that people want to know. So I do hope Kathy Keena answers those questions for voters. In the office, I think one of the biggest gaps in transparency is about results. If you go online, you can see the number of people entering programs, the type of programs there are, but you can't see whether those programs are working. Voters and taxpayers want to know and make sure that their tax dollars are being spent effectively and that the things we're doing are working. Thank you.
The response order for our next question will be Matt, followed by Kathy. And our next question is, Dakota County has a number of accountability programs for first-time offenders. Which of these do you support, and which would you recommend changing? Matt?
Thank you. I support a number of the drug diversion programs. I know the office has initiated a newer one in 2021 for first-time offenders, and there's another one for repeat offenders. I think those programs, those ideas are good. We should be having a drug court here in Dakota County, another thing that Jim Backstrom promoted for quite some time. I do think it could be utilized more. If you look at the data that's available, it looks like just under 9 people a year are entering the drug diversion program, and perhaps we'll get some updated numbers tonight. But that's probably not enough given the level and amount of drug offenses that are being charged in Dakota County. So I would use that a great deal more. I would bring the Veterans Court back right here in Dakota County. I would not be sending our veterans to Carver County to get the help they need. We have the resources here in Dakota County, and we have a number of veterans groups that would be ready and willing to help out to make that program work here. And then finally, you can also look at adding a mental health court for people dealing with mental illnesses that are the root cause of why they're committing crimes. Those three would be the biggest things for me in terms of diverting people out of the criminal justice system and facing conviction.
Kathy?
So as Mr. Little mentioned, we have 2 different drug diversion programs. One was just implemented when I became county attorney, and it's the first time we've had a pretrial drug diversion program. And that one is a little slow in getting going, I think primarily because of the criminal case backlog and all of the drug offenses that would fit within that program are not seeing their way quickly through the court system right now. You know, the other, we currently do have a drug court in Dakota County, which has been very successful. We are considering a mental health treatment court, but we are still in some beginning stages of that. Treatment courts are really high resource type of treatment and court. I mean, they take a lot of different personnel to get them up and running. And you know, that's one of the reasons why we currently went into partnership with Carver County for the Veterans Treatment Court. Treatment courts are funded in part by the state, and in order to get funding from the state, you have to have a certain number of participants. Carver County didn't have enough participants. We didn't have enough, so we combined. And those are conducted by Zoom hearings, so our vets are not required to go over to Carver County. And we have our own veteran service officer, our own probation department, and we have our own Dakota County mentors that are participating in that treatment court.
Thank you. The next question will be first to Kathy and then to Matt. And our next question is, do you think incarceration rates are too high or too low in Dakota County? And why do you think that? Kathy?
So if we're just looking at incarceration rates in Dakota County, what I would comment on and what's of concern to me is, and this is true nationwide, is that 70% of the people that are incarcerated in our local jails are being held pre-trial. So they're waiting for trial. There's bail set, and people are unable to bail out. Now, in some cases, I'll just speak truthfully as a prosecutor, I'm fine with that. But there are things, you know, that we should be looking at. Is there potential bail reform that we could be working on? And one of the things that I think Dakota County could do a better job of is bolstering our pretrial release program. In order to do that, so that means somebody's bail is set, but as an alternative, the court can say, I'm going to release you on this pretrial release program, and they're monitored closely by a probation officer. But we don't have the staff to adequately utilize that program. And so that is something that I would be fully supporting with funding requests, especially from the state. Thank you.
Matt?
Thank you. Well, you heard everything you needed to know in that speech. We don't have the resources. We're considering these things, but we don't have the resources. I have the budget document right here that in 2020 and in 2021, no budget requests were submitted. And you also heard in the previous question that there's this criminal case backlog. Again, these are resources problems. This is why we need new leadership in the Dakota County Attorney's Office. I will get a better budget than they have right now. That is what I've done as mayor, and that's what I did as a state senator. That's what I'll do for you in the Dakota County Attorney's Office. Whatever we're doing right now is not working. To the question specifically, I think at a local level, it's hard to say it at a local level because that's going to have higher fluctuations. But as the nation as a whole, yes, our incarceration rates are too high. We have the highest incarceration rates in the world, and we're not any safer. So we're doing something wrong. And I'll even go back to, there's about 60,000 people, I think, sitting in prison for marijuana. And they wouldn't necessarily be there given current laws in some states. So I think there are ways to reduce incarceration rates. And I know in the previous debate we talked a lot about bail reform, so I hope people get a chance to go back and review that too.
Thank you, candidates. This brings us to closing statements. The candidates will have 3 minutes to give their closing statement. And for this, the response order will be Matt Little, followed by Kathy Keena. Matt?
Fentanyl deaths are at an all-time high. Carjackings are at an all-time high. Gun violence is at an all-time high. The Dakota County Attorney's Office doesn't have the staffing necessary to do programs that would help make us safer and and more efficient. All the things, all the ideas we've heard tonight are in consideration or we're thinking about it. The fact is, after being in the office for 22 years, if you haven't done it already, it's not going to happen in the future. Things are not working right now. We are not safe right now. And so we need to do something different. And that's what I'll offer. The first thing I'll do is work with the board to make sure there's an adequate budget. Again, they have one fewer full-time employee than they did in 2018 in the fastest growing county in Minnesota. The attorneys are overworked. They have not been able to get adequate raises, and that's causing retention problems in the county attorney's office. And those things continue to cycle. That's why we still have a criminal backlog, is because we don't have the resources necessary to take care of it. So that's something I will do immediately. You also heard that the chief deputy position is unfilled. That's a position they have funding for that Kathy Keena has chosen not to fill, even though they have massive staffing needs at Dakota County Attorney's Office. I don't know why that position is unfilled, but I think the voters deserve an explanation there too. But let me end with this. This debate today is about transparency. I am willing to tell you where I stand, even when the issue is difficult, even when it may cost me a vote. I've told you I think the 2020 election is legitimate. I told you I'll protect women's rights. And I've told you that I support background checks, red flag laws, and a ban on assault weapons. Those are answers you have not received from my opponent. And I encourage you to seek those answers. My name is Matt Little, and I'm running to be your next Dakota County Attorney.
Thank you, Matt. Kathy?
I wish to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum. And I wish to thank you, the voters who are watching it, to inform yourselves about the candidates for the position of Dakota County Attorney. So some of you may not know this, but the position of County Attorney is nonpartisan, and is so for good reason. In performing the duties of County Attorney, I am sworn to uphold the federal and state constitutions, and in doing so, I must set aside my personal political beliefs, whatever they may be. In my role as a prosecutor, I have the responsibility of a minister of justice. This carries with it the responsibility to ensure that defendants are accorded procedural justice and that guilt is decided upon the basis of sufficient evidence. In performing my duties, I must be able to act without fear or favor. Politics cannot enter into any of the decisions that I make. Public service with the County Attorney's Office is my passion. Because of my 30 years of experience in serving in 2 different county attorney offices, I am the only candidate who has the qualifications and proven experience for this job. As a criminal prosecutor, I've handled over 6,000 felony-level cases, including homicides. I have significant jury trial experience. My opponent has not prosecuted any cases and has never tried a criminal case. I have conducted several grand juries for the purpose of obtaining indictments for first-degree murder. My opponent has no such experience. I have vindicated the rights of thousands of crime victims. My opponent has no such experience. I have argued several times before the Minnesota Court of Appeals and the Minnesota Supreme Court, and successfully argued a criminal case before the United States Supreme Court. My opponent has no such experience. I have successfully defended the county in civil litigation matters and have provided legal advice to the county board and county departments on a wide array of topics. My opponent has no such experience. I've held several key management positions in the office, including criminal division head, deputy county attorney, and now county attorney. I have management experience, and Mr. Little may not agree with how I'm managing the budget, but when he's able to get 0% levy increases from a county board, then he can come talk to me about that. My proven leadership and experience, in conjunction with the work performed by the dedicated professionals of the Dakota County Attorney's Office, contributes to making this county a premier place in which to work, live, and play. And I humbly ask that you keep it that way by voting to retain me as your county attorney. Thank you.
The League of Women Voters, Dakota County, would like to thank everyone for participating in our forum. We would especially like to thank our candidates, Kathy and Matt, for being part of the democratic process by running for office and for being willing to serve our community. The League of Women Voters also researches issues important to our members and to the health of our communities. If you're interested in finding out more about what we do and how you can make a difference, please visit us at lwvdakotacounty.org. You can find more information about voting and candidates at mnvotes.org and at Vote 411. Again, thanks for viewing, and remember to vote by November 8th.